Welcome to Salem, the podcast.
We are your hosts and favorite Salem tour guides.
My name is Jeffrey Lilly.
And I am Sarah Black.
Today, we're going to be talking about cemeteries. Dun, dun, dun.
Cemeteries here in Salem.
In Salem.
So we're going to try to hit all of them, give each one just a little bit, tell you about some of the notable people buried there, what to expect.
What we like about them, why we appreciate them. Some of them you've probably been to, and some of them you probably definitely have not been to.
So we're going to be talking about St. Mary's,
Yep.
Green Lawn Cemetery, Harmony Grove Cemetery.
Yep, your favorite. And then the three main ones downtown. That is Broad Street, Howard Street, and
Charter Street.
there we go.
We can't forget the Quakers.
Yep, we'll talk about the Quaker Cemetery as well.
Can't forget the
just a little
Quakers. Kind of like taking you on a tour through...
Salem. Cemeteries. Cemeteries in Salem. Tour guides touring cemeteries. Cemetery tours.
Kind of,
Kind of.
I guess.
Um,
So before we get started, I have something ridiculous to tell you.
like more than usual.
Yeah, the podcast has finally seeped into my dreams.
Oh, well, that's a little weird.
I dreamed of little salt and pepper shakers that could like move around last night.
Like,
I have been continuously conceptualizing this haunted pepper situation for far too long.
you should maybe talk to someone.
Oh my God, stop. We did get someone online mention that they were still laughing about the haunted pepper.
I saw that.
So just so everyone knows, we're hoping some type of haunted pepper t-shirt will make it into the first merch drop. Maybe even shakers in the future.
You know what? That's not the worst idea, but it's...
Anyways, how was your weekend? Do you have any funny tour stories to share?
Sort of, kind of, not really. So I wasn't working, but I was, as you may know, as a tour guide, sometimes you just play tour guide.
Oh, yeah.
So I popped into Charter Street the other day just to check a reference real quick. And there were these four women. They all had like those Die With Your Boots On. They were all like super gothy looking, big bag of goth shit.
Yeah.
Totes. And they were sort of looking for something, and I sort of walked past, and then one of them mentions like, oh, Martha Corey. And I was like, well, I can answer their question.
Oh my gosh.
Well, like, it's one of these things that you see these people just sort of standing there wondering. And I was like, I'm sorry, like, just not to,
Yeah.
I was like, Martha Corey's headstone is over there. And the girl's like, I can't like get it or get to a picture of it. I was like, no, I'm sorry. Now
You mean Martha? You mean Mary?
Mary. Sorry.
Mary Corey. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's funny because I was going to bring her up in today's discussion. So this is very fitting that you...
Mary Corey.
No, you got Mary and Martha
I
just on
did.
two different sides of the wall. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, everyone knows about Giles Corey. You'll see him inside the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. Right to the right of him is his wife, Martha Corey, who was hanged 3 days later for witchcraft, but his wife previous to her is buried right in Charter Street Cemetery.
Yes.
So these people were talking about her, or were they talking about...
They were talking about Mary. So
talking
my
about Mary.
apologies.
Okay, no.
And
Yeah.
they were looking for Giles Corey's wife's headstone, right?
Okay.
So Mary Corey, which is in Charter Street.
Right.
But you can't get to because of the new path layout. And I was like, it's that one.
Shoot.
I was like, is that one right over there? I'm sorry, conservation efforts, we can't go up to it anymore. And she's like, oh, I was like, so I was pointing it out because she was like, because when you can't go and you just see rows of headstones.
Right.
And then she asked, she's like, is Giles Corey buried here too? And I was like, no. And then
It just kept going
yeah.
and going.
And then like I started to talk and I was like, hold on, sorry. I'm like, I'm a tour guide in the city. I'm not just like talking to like, I'm like, this is what I do. And they're like, oh, okay. And you could see them sort of, they're like, oh, this is fine. This isn't just some
random dude
I'm
like
still
spewing
like a random,
information.
Yeah. And then so I told them that, sort of where he'd been pressed or the likely area, but he likely wasn't buried there. His body was probably moved, but he still wouldn't have been buried in consecrated ground, even though he wasn't a witch, because he never pled or he's never
How
found
long
guilty.
did this conversation go on?
Like 2 minutes.
Okay. So it's okay.
It was just like,
Because I could see it. I mean, they may just, hey, you want to go get a beer?
Yeah. No, like maybe like 5 minutes, but still, yeah. So I wasn't working, but I was still, playing tour guide. So yeah, so my fun tour story has to do with cemeteries, coincidentally.
And working off the clock.
Yeah.
Very nice.
What about you?
Did you tell them about the podcast?
No.
Damn it, Jeffrey. It's okay. It's okay. They'll find out. Maybe they already know.
Yeah.
Maybe they already listen. They'll be like, oh my God,
that guy.
That was that guy.
That was the guy.
That was the guy.
Hopefully. I got to get better at that.
It's okay. It's okay. Quick story to share. I came up with another joke, like a new joke on one of my tours. I don't know about you, but sometimes they just naturally, organically come about.
They have. Have you ever had a great one and then you forget?
Yes. Or like a great experience, or I meet someone, I have a good exchange with them, and I don't write it down or anything, and it happens so frequently that it just gets filed away nowhere. Mm-hmm. And normally I wouldn't want to share the jokes from the tour because, like, take the tour, pay me money.
Well, so I've found, and I read this. Someone, this isn't my original thought. I don't know where I saw this. The historical information is out there for everyone to take.
Right.
Right. And everyone has the same 1692, 20 people, those are the facts. It's like a presentation of the facts is...
It's the delivery.
But it's the jokes that make it like a little more unique. So that's sort of what makes it your own.
Especially when they happen. Like it's just something that happens on tour and it lands well. So basically what happened, I was in front of the Samantha statue, the Bewitched statue. And at that point we talk about how the economy here in Salem changed, and after the filming of Bewitched and the airing of those episodes, it started becoming known as Witch City. And I start talking about how you see witch on everything, the police cars, our water tower, and I mentioned how my newest roommate, born and raised in Salem, went to Salem High School, remembers swimming in the pool and there being this huge witch at the bottom.
Like the tiled.
Can you imagine? Like I remember being a kid going through the big swimming pool at school and honestly thinking there were sharks in there. Like your kid's imagination, right? But like imagine a big witch at the bottom
I was
of
on
the
swim
pool.
team.
Were you?
Yeah.
No, I was going to say you didn't go to Salem. Okay.
No. So I spent a lot of time in my elementary school.
I would giggle, but to them it was normal, right? So the other night I asked, guess what our mascot is? And they say, oh, the witches. I'm like, yes. I feel bad for the sports team because imagine all the heat they get. Like, oh, you the witches. Where's your broom? And people just start losing it. And I was like, haha, that was so funny. And so fast forward to like later that night. And I go home and I'm having a conversation with my roommate, and her partner also went to Salem High School, was a couple years older. So it was fun having that conversation with two people that were in school as the witches. And so I tell them the joke. They laugh. And then she goes, no, but really, like when we used to play sports teams, they would yell, burn the witches, burn the witches. Isn't that crazy?
Oh
Jeffrey's mouth is wide open right now. How great. Burn the witches.
I don't think that's okay.
No.
I can't.
I couldn't believe it.
I feel like I must have done something like that in high school, but I don't remember.
I guess as a kid in middle school, high school, growing up with witches as your mascot, it's not like a real, I'm sure they're not learning about the actual burning times that took place over in Europe, right? There's no way that that's seeping into their history classes at that point. So their only conception
probably is.
I doubt it.
World history?
I would bet it has like a paragraph.
Maybe, but that's where you learn about it, right? Like where you learn about that sort of stuff in high school.
I would hope so.
I feel like you do. Anyway, maybe not. That's crazy. Did you see the in relation to that the recent video that went around on the internet about a cheer squad that was allowed to perform at Disney?
No.
So I guess they're from somewhere in Texas.
Okay.
And I can't remember what their mascot is or their thing. But their sort of chant is against indigenous people, or maybe they. No, sorry. I apologize because I'm screwing this up.
It's okay.
I think they're like all white, and their mascot is like the Indian, right, in whatever fashion that is. Right.
Yep.
So it's cultural appropriation, and then their uniforms have like the hangy tassel things that, again, sort of more of that.
Right.
And then their chant is like scalp them.
Oh my God. Are you?
No. So I saw the video
No.
and I guess I don't know if I think the video that they sent to Disney to be allowed to perform at one of these things was different. And again, I might be screwing this up, so my apologies. Is different than what they actually performed. But then people are recording these,
what they normally do.
This cheer squad, and there's like,
that's so fucked up.
Yeah. So that's I guess the opposing team saying burn the witches, or the home team saying scalp the that's a lot.
I know.
So yeah.
Wow.
Burn. I wasn't big into a lot of sports in high school. We were the Crusaders, which isn't much better.
We were the Vikings.
I guess that's okay.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, never mind. I'm looking back on the demographic makeup of my hometown.
Yeah, same.
I see a lot of Nordic, Aryan aspirations embedded in that place. Yeah. We made news because there was a woman who was running for city council, much older. She was speaking out against interracial marriage.
Oh.
And this was just a couple years ago.
Obviously. Yay.
Anyways.
If any of you Salemites have any other good stories like that, we'd love to hear it. So let's get to the topic at hand.
Let's talk cemeteries.
Real quick. So I guess this is actually a decent segue from what we were just talking about.
Before we dive into Salem's existing cemeteries, we do want to acknowledge that there were people here for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years before any of these cemeteries were established. So when we take people as tour guides, we take people to Charter Street Cemetery and we say, this is one of the oldest cemeteries in the country. But there are burial grounds, burying points, burial mounds that have been destroyed, lost, forgotten over the course of colonization. So we did want to acknowledge the indigenous tribes that were here before.
Specifically, Salem is on the land of the Agawam, Pawtucket, Pennacook, Namkeg, Massachusetts, and Wampanoag peoples. So all of their burial sites have been lost, which is a tragedy unto itself.
So if you do take a moment to walk through any of these cemeteries, or you're at one local to you, remember that there were people before that.
Who was here first?
All right. So
let's start outside of Salem, or as we enter Salem.
If you are driving into Salem, and there's only a few ways to get in, oftentimes people are coming up North Street, and on your left-hand side, you will see a vast cemetery. Oftentimes people think it's something significant because it's like the first thing you pass when you drive in.
When you enter Salem.
You literally see an entering Salem sign, and then to the left is cemetery.
It's flanked by, and I've had a lot of people be like, oh, what's that like big cemetery? And you're like, it just happens to be a cemetery that happens to be
right there.
Right there on the border.
Full disclosure, we just went in for the very first time. Both of us.
Yeah, so it's St. Mary's Cemetery. It's a predominantly Catholic cemetery, and it is probably the most modern cemetery in the city.
huge.
It was expansive.
What you see from the road is only dare I say, a small portion of it.
Yeah. It just sort of hills up and then it just falls and sprawls away into whatever. So I had learned like this sort of obscure, interesting tidbit about St. Mary's, and I wanted to go explore that today.
We should give a quick shout out to Mike Vitka
Of Spellbound Tours.
The Salem local paranormal investigator and kind of just an all-around cool, interesting guy. So if he says something is worth checking out,
it is almost definitely worth checking out. And yeah, so I picked that up from him, that there was this, and I'd sort of forgotten the information that I was given. So then I was translating it to you poorly.
Yeah, he's basically saying there is a hidden cemetery place within this cemetery. Like there's a little, like a section of stones that you have to walk through woods to get to, all the way in the back.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I want to find this secret cemetery. Where is it?
So my apologies in that. What it actually is maybe cooler.
Oh my God, it was so much cooler. So much cooler.
It seems to be.
And you should specify how exactly we found it, because we had really no idea what we were looking for.
So what I was looking for was either an abandoned, misappropriated. So if you have stones that didn't work or stones that were forgotten or dug up, and there was
Is that really what you were looking for?
just a bunch of stones.
But did you think it was like a cemetery plot?
And not necessarily a plot, but like if there was a mistake stone.
That's what you thought it was, though.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I have to get back to Dr. Vitka. I don't know. I can't remember specifically where the information came from, but I'd remembered like bits and pieces of what someone said that was directing me to this thing. So I knew I had like half the information. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, I'm like, it's just going to be a place where like old stones or broken stones or misspelt stones, right, ended up, which is kind of what we found.
We walked through the woods, and it was a bunch of big chunks of granite,
stairs and pillars for the most part,
as if they were pieces of like a mausoleum. There were some, is that the word I'm looking for? Pillars? Or obelisks? Is that?
No, so obelisk is the
point.
So imagine,
but there were points. Were there
some of them, but some of them had the decorative tops. Mm-hmm. We found it because I didn't know, and so I opened Google Earth and I'm like looking, and I see this like a chunk of stone, and I knew what I was looking for, and Sarah's like, "That's nothing." And I was like, "No, I think this is."
I was like, "What is?" He's like, "This is it. This is it." I was like, "It doesn't look like stone. Like what do you? Yeah, it doesn't look like a cemetery."
Yeah, so. My apologies for not conveying to you properly.
Okay, but it was so cool.
Yeah. Imagine if you're put yourself in a cemetery and you're walking up to a mausoleum, and it is, so you have the mausoleum building, but around the mausoleum, you're going to have steps up, right? And sometimes they'll have like a little gate, like so 4 pillars on each side. So take all the stairs and all the pillars to like 100 of these things?
No, I wouldn't put it that far.
There was a lot.
There was a lot, but I'd say more like 50.
Yeah.
But enough for us to like climb around on for a good 20 minutes. Yeah, so just, we are not condoning going to this place. We're not saying do it. You could easily break an ankle or fall and hit your head, and I genuinely thought we might find a body back there, to be honest.
I mean, there was a few spots.
It was very creepy.
So do it safely.
Do it safely.
Go with a friend.
Wear good shoes.
Yeah.
But it was really, really cool.
So weird. And there was a lot of letters. There were like these...
they were like end caps.
Yeah, of something that had, we saw like a D and like an M and an R. Not like together. They were just... It must have taken...
We did see a couple names, too. So I do want to look up.
A lot of crosses. A heart with a cross.
That was pretty neat.
All sorts of it was strange. One of the more strange places I think I've ever been. Yeah. And we don't know what it, like, where were they? Some of them were unfinished. Some of them they were all clearly broken. They couldn't have all been mistakes.
And it appeared right off of the Old North River.
So it looks like a small estuary of the North River.
So we weren't sure if that played a role at some point.
There was some. So there was definitely all the granite. There was a couple chunks of marble, but then there was a couple pieces of what looked like a wall of a building at one point, and then there were these large cement and structures that sort of put in my mind that boats may have been coming up here and dropping this granite.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know about that one.
I don't know about that one either.
But
it's weird.
I don't know how it got there. I don't know how. It's just like.
It's just there.
Just there.
Yeah. I don't know.
And also think about from the other side, there was trees. So it's not like you couldn't drop.
Yeah. There was like a tiny little path, and I was like, I think that's what I'm looking for.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
Have you seen, you've seen The Lion King, right?
Yeah.
Remember the part when they're wandering through the elephant graveyard and they're like climbing through all, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
That's how it felt, like going through those big chunks of rock.
They weren't that big.
Obviously.
No, but I totally understand the feeling. The feeling of like, and especially, everything that the light touches, right, is yours, Simba, et cetera, except for over there. And you're like, this is the cemetery, except for over there.
Yep.
And then you're like, that place is somewhere we shouldn't be. And then we're like wandering amongst the forgotten. No, you're
exactly. And like, oh, we shouldn't be here, but we are.
Dun. So that was St. Mary's.
So what turned out to be, this is what we were least excited for, was going to St. Mary's. We're just like, okay, this is a big, pretty scarcely wooded area. It's very open. There's no trees. It's very modern.
It gets a little nicer as you go farther back.
Right.
I will 100% grant them that.
Definitely.
That road view is not their best view.
Right. And that's what our original perception was. But if you drive back, I mean, you could spend a very long time in there.
Yeah.
So definitely worth a trip. Then we move on to my favorite ones, Harmony Grove and Green Lawn Cemetery.
So these are two garden cemeteries.
Garden or rural cemeteries became very popular in the mid-19th century.
Yeah.
So think about the oldest burial grounds you see, say, in Boston. It's right in the heart of the city, surrounded by skyscrapers, surrounded by large buildings. The city has been built out around these. As these cities are getting busier, people want a place to kind of escape and pay also respect to the dead in a cleaner way.
And more people are dying, right? Like we're going through the Industrial Revolution.
Right, they don't have the space.
A lot more people moving from these farms, wherever, to the city. And then I'm not saying they're dying right away. I mean, there were a lot of people dying right away, but that's just going to increase the population, which is going to increase the density, which is going to increase the deaths in these tiny little spaces that have been here for 150 years already a little crowded. So we start to pick these sections of city outside of the city.
Oftentimes a couple miles just outside the city. I think Mount Auburn
Cemetery
over in Cambridge,
Massachusetts. That is the oldest cemetery in the United States.
Over 90,000 graves.
That's cool.
How crazy is that?
And
place is huge.
Yeah. So anyone coming to Salem, highly recommend all of our cemeteries. They're gorgeous. Mount Auburn is on a different level. It's gorgeous. If you're like looking for someone to spend a day outside, a lot of times we get the question, what would you do outside of Salem? And you're like, yeah, there's all these cool places. Mount Auburn is usually high on my list.
Especially during the spring and summer.
Yeah.
Fall too.
Right now, it's probably all the flowers, all the trees.
I used to describe to folks when I was trying to explain Harmony Grove that it's like a mini Mount Auburn. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't far off because one of the people that designed Harmony Grove was also
one of the architects.
The designer for Mount
cool.
Auburn. So
these are cemeteries, right? And I just want to take a little second to be a little pedantic.
Which is totally fair.
So there's a difference today a lot of these terms, cemeteries, graveyard, and like a burying ground are all interchangeable. commonly, but there are specific differences. So when we have Charter Street Cemetery in the center of the city, which dates back to 1637, and I tell you that Mount Auburn's the oldest cemetery, those two things don't fit. That's because these rural cemeteries are plots of land that are like pre-designated and planned out. And that's sort of technically what a cemetery is. Anything that predates that is just like a burying ground, a burial hill, the old burying point.
Right.
And those are the terms we used. And then a graveyard is a yard that has graves.
Like think burying so-and-so in the backyard.
Yes. And that's not like your spouse, that's someone who's passed away. Never mind. They came out a little wrong. You can just.
That's why I didn't like include burying grandpa in the backyard.
Yeah,
I was trying to be like, oh, sensitive.
So that's the difference between a cemetery and a burying point and a graveyard. But graveyards are private residences and religious institutions. So a church can have a graveyard too. And then we don't really have them in this country. Do we? We might have some. I don't actually know. Abbeys.
Right. Like over in England.
Yeah. So that's like a building. That's giant mausoleum or tomb. So we don't really typically have those here, but those are also very common in other parts of the world.
So if you go to either Harmony Grove or Green Lawn, there are chapels at either.
Gorgeous.
They are gorgeous. Either one. So this is something that could be added to a cemetery.
Yeah. And that's oftentimes where they might have a small prayer.
Right.
Or you can go and reflect, pray. Service, things along these lines.
So Green Lawn was established in 1807, and from what I read, it went through quite a few acquisitions of land, and it is now currently the largest cemetery in Salem, which to me I was surprised because it doesn't look like it is.
It doesn't feel it. It does have a large body of water.
Two. Well, I mean, one's baby. But
but it does have like a somewhat decent size, I say lake. Lake's the wrong pond.
It's a pond.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a lake.
But so if that's included in their property, like I see it, but like it definitely felt like St. Mary's was larger. But
yeah, I would agree. Nope. The chapel itself was put there in 1894, and it is a 24 by 40 foot chapel in high Victorian architecture.
The stone,
it's gorgeous.
Points. What would you call the little? Oh, they're called something. Spindles, finials are nice. They're not like huge and expansive, but they're just sort of these quaint, like just on the top, these little.
And the color, I don't know if you noticed, like the color
it's like a red.
Oh yeah, the stone and the detail.
Yeah, it's like that red sandstone.
And a beautiful.
There's a little garden.
Beautiful garden. It was a pretty nice garden.
Yeah, and that's always nice to have these sort of structures as you walk in.
So that chapel was actually a gift from Walter Scott Dickinson in honor of his wife, who passed away.
I think I knew that. Yeah. They recently did some renovations to it. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And then there's quite a bit larger one in Harmony Grove. Personally, Harmony Grove is my favorite cemetery in all of Salem. I think I've said that before, and I will say it again.
Mentioned that on the Q&A episode.
Yeah, I actually dragged you last summer. I was like, you got to come with me. Had you been?
No.
Before you had never been. Okay, so you personally. I know it wasn't my secret, but I stumbled upon that cemetery. I had driven by to go to Stop and Shop over and over and over again. And when you're driving on Grove Street, all you see is just this very heavily wooded cemetery in these rolling hills. I was like, I gotta get inside. And when I walked inside for the first time, I was taken aback. It was absolutely beautiful. And so I love to recreate that experience for other people. So if I ever have someone come to Salem, or if I have a friend here in town that hasn't seen it yet, I'm like, oh, come see this place. Come see this place. And so we went and...
Oh, my God, it was so hot.
It wasn't that hot when we went. No, it wasn't.
I changed my shirt.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It was hot. But it was a great experience.
It was really nice.
So we like parted ways, put our headphones in, and kind of just wandered and frolicked through the fields. I know people that do picnics there. Absolutely gorgeous.
So the picnicking in a cemetery is not a new concept. That's actually a lot of times what these spaces used to be used for. Back when they first opened, it was sort of the largest source of like public green space. Mm-hmm. I mean, even today, like our common is nice, but our common back then was still probably half flooded most of the time.
Right.
There wasn't places where you could just go outside. We had the Salem Willows, but that was somewhat unique to Salem.
And that was meant for like that
Yeah.
was reserved for
Most
tuberculosis. So
Yeah.
you're not going to the Willows to hang out.
So if you want to go outside and have a picnic, these rural cemeteries are the place to go. You would go with your family, go for an afternoon, sit in sort of maybe sometimes empty plots, or go sit by your family.
I was going to say, think about the Victorians during this era. Like it's
all
very death centered. The
yeah.
way that they view
They have
the
mourning
afterlife.
jewelry and all these sorts of things. So they'd get, grab a roast beef sandwich and go sit with, grandpa for the afternoon.
Shall we do that? Go to King's and
I mean, let's do it. But that fell out of fashion for two reasons. One, more public green space was becoming available, and two, humans are garbage, and they like to leave their garbage all over the place.
So they had to start instilling more rules and fences
and barring people from going, because literally all the picnickers would just leave their trash all over the place. There were some cities that started to not give tickets. Like, you needed a ticket to get in, so you had to go and get like a official, like, I have a relative here, so I can go in and sit with them. So it's like an admit one ticket. So if you ever see one that was like an antique show or something, that's
for a cemetery.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, so that sort of fell out of fashion in the early probably about 1915, 1920, and people stopped littering and leaving their trash all over the place. Thank you, humans. So, but no, Harmony Grove. That's basically what we did. We got coffee. And we wandered around, sat down, listened to some music, and
just took in the scenery. It's so quiet in there.
Yeah, and there are some important people. Who's the big one?
There are several large
mausoleum.
There's tons of mausoleums, but there's also several large like monument style.
Monument. Thank you.
Burying sites
so
think of Harmony Grove as the place where all the rich and powerful of Salem. It's basically, like I said, it's the Mount Auburn of Salem. Boston has all those Boston Brahmins buried in Mount Auburn. We had the Peabody family. You'll see a lot of the common names if you walk around there. Putnam. I think that large one might be for Bertram.
Oh, the Bertram house. That makes sense.
You want to hear something fun?
Yes, I always want to hear something fun.
John Bertram, he was the founder of Salem Hospital, and his home is now the Salem Public Library.
So what's the Bertram house?
I don't know.
It's on the Common. It's a home for elderly.
Probably named after
Just
him,
named after
maybe?
him. Okay.
I mean, I'm sure the Bertram family was more.
Yeah. I mean, I just assumed that the Bertram house was like his house, right? Like if you have the Joshua Ward house, so the library used to be his house. That's crazy.
I know. Well, it's funny because we were just there.
Oh, that's the big one with the lions and the.
Yes.
So it's like a massive stone casket on top of a pillar,
just baking in the sun.
Yeah. I doubt he's in there. He's got to be on the ground.
I mean, there's that weird morbid fascination when we walk through cemeteries like this. You can't help but peer into the mausoleums and try to see if you can see something.
Right.
Or you wonder if they actually are inside that crypt.
Well, like in abbeys in England, you see like those knights, those people, the kings and queens. Like if you go to Westminster Abbey and you walk by like a stone casket with the facade of they are right there.
Right. They're right underneath.
They're right inside. Yeah. So with these, like I look at that, I'm like, are you in that thing?
I mean, I would assume so. If you're going to go to that trouble, spend all that money, you better actually put him in there.
Yes. And then another one, Peabody is in there. He has a similar looking casket, right?
Is that the other super, super large one?
Yeah, but he's like behind.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's like that big stone stepped thing to the thing. Sorry, I know I'm being obscure. But then there's like a little casket behind that. I'm like, okay, cool. So yeah, so there's like a row of these people, which is kind of neat.
A couple other significant folks buried there.
Yep.
Caroline Emerton.
Okay.
Yeah, a lady behind the House Seven Gables restoration.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was pretty cool. And then George Swinnerton Parker, founder of the Parker Brothers Company.
Oh,
also
interesting.
buried there.
We're going to have to go and check that out before we do the Parker Brothers episode.
We'll go play a game of Clue in front of his grave.
I think Monopoly might be a little more appropriate.
Okay, that's fine. Do you want to be there that long?
No. We could just get a picture of it, maybe.
No, I actually want to play.
Also, that is where, if anyone's been to the Ropes Mansion, where the Hocus Pocus filming location, or if you've been in the back in the Ropes Garden, their burying plot is also in Harmony Grove. So all sorts of Salemites.
You want to hear an eerie story?
Yes.
Of Harmony Grove?
Yes.
So as I said, I bring as many people as I can into that cemetery.
Do you bring them all back out with you?
Yes. I just bury them on top of someone else. Oh.
I bring everyone I know. It's like not everyone leaves. You know what? I'm gonna write a ghost story about a tour guide who brings people into the cemetery, and whenever they leave, they always seem to be one or two people short.
Oh my God. It's gonna be a bestseller.
There we go.
You better change my name, but give me some of the proceeds.
No. I think.
What?
I think your name's appropriate.
It's a very witchy name. But anyway, so this was shortly after I graduated college, and my sister had come out for graduation. She's from Michigan, of course, and she's not the biggest fan of historical stuff. Like, she humors me, but for the most part, it's just kind of meh, goes over her head.
Right.
But I'm like, you got to come see this cool cemetery. It's amazing. It's beautiful. We're walking through those winding roads. It is a large cemetery. There is, I think I read something like 20,000 burials in that place. So lots of people. A couple weeks prior, I had been doing research on the house that we were living in. We were right off of Bridge Street, like as you were going north to Beverly, one of the oldest brick homes in Salem, 1830 or so. And I was chatting with the landlord and asked if I could get some of the records from the house. I was just curious. For that semester, I had done a lot of genealogical research, so I was really into like seeing who lived where.
Your dad's really into that too, right?
My dad's super into it too. Yeah. I definitely get that from him. I was able to look at one of the old maps of Salem, and I saw our house, and on top of that, back in the day, they would write the person who lived there right on top of it. Mm-hmm. Ebenezer Cleveland was his name. It's very odd, interesting, right? Right? Maybe I'll name a dog that one day.
I mean, I guess it's no different than Grover Cleveland, and he was the president, so.
Yeah, I guess.
But
Ebenezer. I don't know. There's just
Scrooge.
Like, right? We think Scrooge. I just thought it was such an interesting name. So I'm walking through Harmony Grove with my sister and my father. It's hot as hell. No one wants to be there. We're rounding a corner, and something made me stop. And I looked down to my left, and right off of the side of the path, like right there, was a small headstone that said Ebenezer Cleveland. And it was him.
Okay.
Isn't that insane?
That's a little weird.
So crazy.
Huh. So I would... Interesting.
The only thing I definitely believe in like weird energies and stuff like that, weird coincidences. The only like reasonable explanation to it, other than just sheer coincidence, is my eyes scanned over it ever so quickly and my brain registered it before I could.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and I stopped dead in my tracks and I saw it. But regardless, the fact that he was buried right there on the side of the path, and I haven't been able to find it since.
To be fair, you could have been on any other path. So I think that the coincidence here to me is you happen to wander down that path. Then I get into the psychological aspect of like cognitive understanding and, recognition. And we see so much
more that
and our brain we have like a filter, right, in our brain, and it'll pick up some things, and not like none of this information is important to me, but as like that sieve is getting done, there was a bit of information that the brain was like, that's important, and it just grabbed that real quick. But again, you ended up on that road. So that's a bit of a coincidence.
So weird.
So we've got St. Mary's,
Harmony Grove, and Green Lawn. But I think we're going to cut it right here.
We just had too much good content to leave too much on the cutting room floor. So we're going to give you part 1. Well, we just gave you part 1. And we're going to give you part 2 next week. So we'll round out our Salem Cemeteries now, 2-part episode next week.
So if Broad Street, Howard Street, or Charter Street happens to be your favorite,
which they
probably are.
Probably.
You're going to have to wait till then.
Right? Dun, dun. Sorry. Tune in next time.
So that means we got 2 weeks of dead people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very Salem of us.
Of course. But for now, thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review, and always tell a few friends.
Follow us on all the social medias. We have Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. That's at Salem the Podcast. Otherwise, if you have any questions, email us at hello@salemthepodcast.
And if you'd like to book a tour with either Jeffrey or myself, links to both those companies are in the show notes.
Thanks for listening.
See you later.